Hi, my name's Althea Gordon, and welcome back to episode 2 of our Creativity in Isolation series. We had a really great response from our first episode, so I'd like to thank you all so much for joining in. What I would like to encourage though is everyone to be really brave and to share your pieces of art that you create. So we had loads of positive feedback, loads of people saying that they took part and they tried it, but nobody was willing to share their art. So this is our second episode, and I'd like to encourage you this time round just to be a little bit more brave and share. So today we're going to be using the same little materials listing as we did in the first episode. So if you didn't see that, don't worry, it's okay. I'll put it up on the screen either side of me so you can have a look. And if you've received this via email, you will have an attachment, a PDF attachment of this sheet. So you'll be able to see what it is that we're talking about. And today what I've chosen is from the topic, I've chosen texture, and from the material column I've chosen pastels, and from the action column I've chosen mark. Now, mark might not make sense immediately, so I'm just going to do a little definition there. Mark making is basically a term used to describe different lines, patterns, textures we create in a piece of art. So it doesn't just apply to paint on a canvas, but it could be pencil on paper, a pen mark, anything, any art form on any surface. So today we're looking at using pastels. So we'll be looking at mark making with those pastels on paper. So texture. First of all, I just want to break it down. So texture, what do we think about when we hear the word texture? For me, I go immediately to my sense of touch, and texture is all around us, artificial, natural, and texture for me is really about the senses and what you can feel. But also for me, the other thing that springs to mind is taste, because food has a texture to it. So today we're going to be looking at those different textures and how they inspire our mark making. So something artificial, what do you feel compelled to draw when you feel something smooth? When you feel something rough, what are you compelled to draw? What marks do you make on a page? The second thing, we're looking at using the medium of pastels. Not everybody has access to pastels, so please don't panic there. There are a number of different things you can use instead. You could look at crayons, you could look at soft pencils, so your 2B, 4B, 6B pencils, and anything that has a really kind of soft touch to it. And the reason why that is, again, similar to the last episode, is pastels are very forgiving. They smudge, they smear, and they're soft. So when you're looking at mark making and you're looking at texture, it works really, really well. And of course, there's two different types. Hopefully you can see them here. Two different types of pastels. So we've got our chalk pastels here, usually kind of a square in shape, and they're quite dusty. They do get a little bit messy. And then we've also got a second set of pastels here, which is more commonly known is our oil pastels there. So I've just used a little tray, but like I said, if you don't have pastels, don't be going, oh, well, that's it, I can't do this. That's not the case. Have a look around the home, see if you've got some crayons, if you've got some soft pencils, and if you don't, give me a buzz and let's see if we can create something for you. Maybe we can send something out, we can drop something off, or we can come up with something that you do have lying around the home. Okay, so that's pastel. Now, mark. What marks can we use to draw with? and what do you prefer to draw with. So thinking about what I said earlier around mark making, we've got, obviously we can make lines, and with lines you can do straight lines, you can do zigzag lines, you can do waves, you can look at what I like to call squiggles, so lots of little tiny curvy lines. You can do a crosshatch. You can look at circles, which could then include spirals, individual circles, and obviously playing around with sizes as well, so you can have a big circle with lots of little circles inside of it. You can use rubbing. Rubbing is a really effective way of mark making. So if anyone has ever done that at home before, or in an art situation where you place something behind or underneath a piece of paper and then you rub on top of that to get an impression, that is also mark making. And then you can also play with varying width of your mark. So is your mark going to be a big, thick, bold line, or is it going to be a really fine, light line? And then looking at pressure as well. So because we're looking at using our soft pastels today, or crayons or pencils, whatever it is you're using, you can then play around with how much pressure you put on that. So, the varying pressure might be, I'm going really hard and it makes a really firm, thick line. Or you might be barely putting enough pressure, so it just kind of scrapes across the surface. So I hope that's given you a little bit to think about. Today, what I would like to explore is nature versus artificial texture with mark making in pastels. So I'm going to stick with my oil pastels. I'm going to be using today myself, I'm going to be using mixed media paper, which is, I'll just hold this up so you can see what it is that I'm using. Hopefully that's in focus. If not, I might put some details on the side there. The paper is quite thick, but it also is really forgiving to a lot of different mediums. So if we decide to use paint or ink, pastels, pencils, you can use the same paper. It's very versatile. But if you've only got A4 printer paper, it will work just fine as well. You can draw really wonderful things on this, and the most beautiful thing with just your A4 printer paper is it can be quite thin, and so if you're doing rubbings or if you're doing mark making, it's actually really versatile for that, because it allows you to do that different mark making and rubbing a lot more effectively, because with the thicker paper you obviously can't do that. So yes, I'm using the thicker paper today, and I've got a few things to inspire you with artificial versus nature. So I've got a beautiful big park near my home office that we are working out of at the moment, and I came and I collected a few gum nuts the other day. Now, gum nuts are really interesting in their texture, really interesting. Right around that top rim is quite smooth, and then you've got quite a coarse casing on the outside. I'll just drop them everywhere. And you've got loads of different nuts from trees that you can look at as well. So there's different sizes and shapes. So that could be something that you might want to, if you're getting out and going on daily walks, you might find. I myself am very lucky. I've actually got a gorgeous, hopefully we can all see this, gorgeous birds of paradise plant in my front yard that I'm going to use today for inspiration. And the reason is because for me, these flowers are really angular. You can see here it comes up and turns into a sharp point, and there's loads of pointed petals coming up in bright orange and sort of a purpley sort of, I don't know, indigo sort of colour, and then you've got this vibrant green. Yet when you have a look at the leaves are really smooth and really quite delicate and rounded in comparison to these sharp angular flowers. So for my mark making, I'm going to use my inspiration from those today. Another thing you can look at, which I thought could be quite interesting, that everybody has at home, pegs. Everybody's got pegs at home. So you can have a look at using something artificial texture-wise. Pegs have got a really interesting shape. They've got an interesting feel, and there's loads of different shapes and types of peg as well. You might have the old school wooden ones at home. Again, that kind of blurs the line between artificial and natural, doesn't it? So have a look around the home. You might have more inspiration than you actually imagined possible. So find something that takes your fancy. My nature versus artificial, I've got my nature in a vase over here, and the vase is obviously artificial because it's been man-made. So I'm gonna open this one up and get started. Now with mark making, what you can do, and I'm going to use one of these A4 sheets of paper that I mentioned earlier, is you can have a little play to start off with. See what happens when you run your material across the page really lightly. What happens when you pull it across really heavy, and have a look and see what the difference is there. What happens, I'm going to use a technique that the gorgeous Lily at the West Australian Art Gallery taught me, is sometimes have a play with your left hand if you're right-handed, and have a play with your right hand if you're left-handed. So again, run that line through really faintly and then run it through thicker again, and just see the difference between your two hands and see how your mark making differs between the two hands. It's quite interesting. So you can look at lines, you can look at circles as well. So having a look at some fine circles versus some bold circles. You might want to look at spirals, and then you might then go, okay, I've figured out maybe I want to do a combination of lines and maybe a few curly bits. Have a play. And you know what? If this part takes you half an hour, that's okay. I'm just rushing so that I can get through this tutorial and you guys can have a play. But have a little play with your mark making. The other really great mark making is, sorry, I've got my microphone on the table, so you probably hear this rather loudly, is dotting. And you might find, again, that's a really valid form of art, mark making. And what you can actually do with dots, for me, is actually, believe it or not, a really similar way to the way our computer printers work. So once you start putting loads of dots together of a similar colour, or complementary colours I should say, you start getting a really amazing pattern form. And this is why I like working with soft, forgiving materials. So I've just used 2 different shades of green and a shade of yellow there. What I might do is I might take a photo of this sheet of paper so you can see. That is just dots joining together. So have a play with your mark making, see what happens, see what you can explore, and then have a go at mark making to create either your natural texture or your artificial texture. So I'm going to pop my mark making sheet to the side. Hopefully I'll bring this in so you can see a little bit of it. I can see a little bit too. Hopefully it's not casting too many shadows. Look like it's Attack of the Triffids there. Again, same as last time, have a play with the orientation of your paper. You might decide you want to go portrait, you might want to go landscape. I think for this one I might actually go portrait, even though the vase is quite wide. These Birds of Paradise flowers are quite tall, so I think it'll really give me justice if I put a bit of length to it. So here we go. think I've got to a first draft stage. As I did in the previous episode, I will look to do a few stills at the end so that you can kind of see the progression of the art piece. And I will also explain this time around, I do like to sometimes use technology to enhance my art. I'm a big fan of a free app called Oilist. If you go to either the Google Store or the Play Store, if you're Android, and type in Oilist, Oilist, it's a free app that turns your art or photo. So I take a photo of my artwork, and then I apply the Oilist settings to my own design, and then you can kind of enhance certain things and make it look a little bit more, I don't know, whatever you want to make it look a little bit more like. So yeah, if you are interested in that sort of thing, I would encourage you to have a look on the App Store. There are quite a few different ones as well, so have a look through. If you don't know what to choose, you can contact us. I'll put our contact details somewhere here. Send us an email or give us a buzz, and we can most certainly help you out. If we don't answer straight away, just leave a message, and we'll get back to you when we can. But yeah, there are a lot out there. You can either look at reviews, or you can just jump on, start playing with Oilist, and if you like it, great. If not, you can go searching for something else. But what I'd like to just discuss before we quickly wrap up is my process. So you would have seen it in fast time, but I used a lot of lines for today's mark making and a lot of smudging. So lines and smudging, using the pastels to do lines and smudging and making that the mark. So extending my line, blurring the line, that is all still a part of mark making, and playing around with that. And as I said before, you may only get to this stage, and that's okay, because you're playing with your drawing medium, and that's great. That is in itself is rewarding. Sometimes a little something like this can end up taking over your doodling and your sort of practice, and becoming something amazing. So please don't feel like you need to progress, or that, oh, I've got to get to the end point. It's not about that. It's about the process. It's about the journey. And, you know, what fun, what learnings did you explore along the way? So for me today, I think, you know, making those lines, making some bold color choices. I haven't used orange, and the reason being is, for me, these sorts of birds of paradise flowers always look like flames. So to accentuate that flame feeling, I've just used red and yellow and smudged them together. So in parts there are now orange because I've smudged them, but it's also yeah, very distinctly red and yellow.